Most career interceptions thrown. When you think of Brett Favre, you probably think of the cannon arm, the endless highlights, and that Iron Man streak of starts that may never be broken. But tucked into his Hall of Fame resume is one of the ugliest records in football history: the most career interceptions. Favre finished his career with 336 picks, a number that still sits at the very top of the NFL record book. What makes it even crazier is that he also number 4 all-time for career touchdowns at 508, meaning every fireworks show came with a guaranteed disaster or two. Favre's gunslinger mentality was legendary. He believed every throw could fit into every window, and sometimes it worked beautifully. Other times, it looked like he was playing catch with the wrong team. Packers fans lived with the chaos because it also brought them wins and a Super Bowl, but opponents knew if they stayed patient, the turnovers would come. Even in Minnesota late in his career, the bad habits never left. Favre's record shows that greatness often comes with risk, but 336 interceptions is a mountain no one wants to climb. And with modern quarterbacks being coached to protect the ball at all costs, this might be one NFL record that truly lasts forever. But as reckless as Favre was, at least he could balance it with touchdowns. The next record on this list came in just one game, and it was nothing short of a disaster. Most interceptions thrown in a single game. It's one thing to throw interceptions over a 20-year career, it's another to throw so many in a single game that your name gets etched into football history forever. That's exactly what happened to Jim Hardy in 1950. Playing quarterback for the Chicago Cardinals against the Philadelphia Eagles, Hardy threw an unfathomable 8 interceptions in one afternoon. The Cardinals were embarrassed 45-7, and Hardy's performance went down as one of the most catastrophic quarterback outings ever. What's so shocking is that Hardy wasn't a scrub. He had actually been named a Pro Bowler just one season earlier. But on that day, every pass seemed to find the wrong jersey. The Eagles' defense feasted, and Hardy never lived it down. To this day, no one has broken or even tied the record. Even the most notorious interception-prone quarterbacks of the modern era, from Nathan Peterman to Jameis Winston, never came close to hitting 8 in one game. Hardy's meltdown is so infamous that every time a quarterback throws 4 or 5 picks in a game, commentators bring it up as the benchmark for total collapse. It shows just how ugly things can get when the wheels come off. And while Hardy did manage to bounce back later in his career with some solid performances, the stain of that 8 interception afternoon will never go away. But if you think one bad game is tough, imagine taking a beating every single week for an entire season. Most times sacked in a season, getting sacked is part of a quarterback's job, but no quarterback in NFL history has ever been hit as much as David Carr was during his rookie year with the Houston Texans in 2002. Carr was drafted first overall to be the face of the expansion franchise, but instead, he became the face of punishment. That season, Carr was sacked an NFL record 76 times. To put that into perspective, a quarterback today who gets sacked 50 times in a season is considered completely unprotected. Carr blew past that number with weeks to spare. The Texans had a patchwork offensive line made up of cast-offs and inexperienced players, and defenses absolutely terrorized them. Carr never had time to breathe, let alone develop. Analysts say he developed phantom pressure, where even when the pocket was clean, he felt ghosts of defenders and rushed his throws. His confidence shattered before it ever had a chance to grow. And while Carr stuck around as a backup in the league, his career as a franchise guy was over before it started. That record of 76 sacks shows how badly a team can ruin a young quarterback by throwing him into the fire too soon. Expansion excitement quickly turned into pity as fans watched their prized rookie get demolished week after week. And while Carr was the victim, the Texans' failure to protect him is the real story. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the worst records aren't about bad players, they're about bad support. But as ugly as that was, the next record belongs to not just one man, but entire franchises that collapsed for an entire season. Most losses in a season. Going winless in the NFL is the ultimate mark of shame, and only 2 franchises have ever sunk to that level. The 2008 Detroit Lions and the 2017 Cleveland Browns both managed to finish 0-16, becoming symbols of futility. For the Lions, it was a season of total collapse under head coach Rod Marinelli. They cycled through quarterbacks, the defense gave up points in bunches, and by the time December rolled around, the entire city of Detroit was just hoping they'd avoid embarrassment. They didn't. 9 years later, the Browns joined them. Despite drafting talent and claiming they were building toward the future, Cleveland was a circus. Hugh Jackson infamously went 1-31 over a 2-year stretch, including the infamous 0-16 campaign. Fans even held a perfect season parade in the snow to mock the franchise, a brutal reminder of how hopeless things felt. Both teams eventually climbed out of the hole. The Lions drafted Matthew Stafford the following year, and the Browns landed Baker Mayfield and later Deshaun Watson. But the scars of those winless seasons remain. The NFL is designed for parity, with draft picks and free agency helping bad teams improve. Going 0-16 shows not just poor play, but a total breakdown of culture, coaching, and leadership. And while it's now a 17-game season, the stain of being winless lingers in history. Nobody wants that record, and fans pray it never returns. But the next record isn't about losing every game, it's about giving up more points than anyone ever thought possible. But first, only cool people are subscribed to this channel, so hit that subscribe button before we go any further. Most points allowed in a season. Defense wins championships, but for the 1981 Baltimore Colts, defense barely showed up at all. That season, the Colts set an infamous record by allowing 533 points in just 16 games, an average of over 33 points per contest. To put that in perspective, modern defenses considered bad usually allow around 400 points in a season. The Colts blew past that by more than 100. Opponents shredded them through the air and on the ground. They gave up 40 or more points 4 different times, including a humiliating 59-13 beatdown by the Chargers. What made it worse is that their offense wasn't terrible. They had Burt Jones at quarterback and could move the ball, but it never mattered because their defense was a turnstile. Week after week, Baltimore fans watched helplessly as opponents marched down the field with ease. It was the kind of season that ruins careers and reshapes franchises. The Colts fired their coaching staff soon after, and the defense's reputation became a punchline. To this day, when people talk about historically bad defenses, the 1981 Colts top the list. The team moved to Indianapolis a few years later, but the ghosts of that season still linger. Allowing over 500 points in a single year is a badge of dishonor, and nobody has come close to being that bad since. But as humiliating as giving up points is, the next record was so lopsided, it turned a championship into a national joke. Worst blowout loss. The Chicago Bears are one of the NFL's most storied franchises, but their name also sits next to the ugliest scoreline in league history. In the 1940 NFL championship game, the Bears were annihilated by Washington 73-0. That's not just the worst loss in playoff history, it's the worst blowout in the entire league's existence. The game was supposed to be competitive. Just a few weeks earlier, Washington had beaten Chicago 7-3 in the regular season, but George Halas's Bears adjusted, and what followed was pure humiliation. Chicago's T-formation offense exploded, scoring touchdown after touchdown while Washington committed turnover after turnover. By halftime, it was already a rout. By the fourth quarter, fans were booing and leaving in droves as the score piled up into the 70s. No team has ever come close to matching that margin of defeat again. In today's NFL, with better athletes and more balance, it's almost unthinkable that a championship game could end like that. The Bears rode that win into legend while Washington carried the shame for decades. When people talk about the NFL's worst losses, nothing else comes close. Losing by 73 in a title game isn't just bad, it's humiliating on a level no player ever wants to experience. And while that blowout stands alone in the history books, the next record belongs not to a team, but to a quarterback who couldn't stop giving the ball away. Most career quarterback fumbles. Brett Favre wasn't just the interception king. He also had a habit of dropping the ball, literally. Over his 20-year career, Favre fumbled 166 times, the most of any quarterback in NFL history. Some of it came from his style of play. Favre was never afraid to hold the ball a second too long, scramble around, or try to make something happen out of nothing. That gunslinger mentality led to highlight reel touchdowns, but it also meant defenders had endless opportunities to strip him. Playing in Green Bay's freezing cold didn't help either, with slick conditions often leading to loose grips. The number is so massive because of his longevity. Favre started 297 straight games, meaning there were more chances for mistakes. Still, 166 fumbles is jaw-dropping compared to modern quarterbacks, who are coached relentlessly on ball security. For context, Tom Brady finished his 23-year career with 139, and he played in far more games. Favre's fumbling ways became part of his legend. Packers fans learned to live with the chaos because he brought them wins, but defenses always knew there was a chance the ball would end up on the turf. And that's not all. Favre's turnover-heavy resume makes him one of the rare players who owns multiple worst records while still being a first-ballot Hall of Famer. But while Favre coughed it up constantly, the next quarterback's record is about how often he was swallowed whole. Most career quarterback sacks taken, longevity has its perks, but it also comes with scars. Aaron Rodgers, one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play, also holds the record for most career sacks taken with over 570. It's a number that will continue to climb until he retires. Rodgers has always been known for extending plays, dancing around the pocket, and waiting for receivers to break open. That creativity produced iconic throws, but it also meant he was a sitting duck for defensive linemen. Unlike Favre, who played in an era with fewer defensive athletes, Rodgers faced modern edge rushers with freakish speed and power. Over time, the hits added up. Rodgers missed parts of seasons with broken collarbones and ankle injuries, but he always came back, and the sacks kept piling up. In a strange way, this record reflects both durability and vulnerability. Most quarterbacks don't play long enough to accumulate that many sacks. Rodgers survived through it, but the price was being the most hit quarterback in league history. With the Jets now relying on him late in his career, every sack feels heavier, every hit more dangerous. This is one record no quarterback wants, because it shows how much punishment you've endured, and as ugly as it looks, it's still better than what the next guy endured, because his record shows complete failure from start to finish. Lowest modern quarterback passer rating. For a modern starter, no one crashed harder than Ryan Leaf. In 1998, the Chargers drafted him second overall, right after Peyton Manning. One became a legend, the other became the biggest bust in NFL history. Leaf's rookie year was a disaster, highlighted by a passer rating of 39.0, the lowest ever by a starting quarterback in the modern NFL. To put it in perspective, spiking the ball into the dirt every play would have given him a rating of 39.6, meaning statistically, he was worse than giving up on every down. Leaf completed just 45% of his passes, threw only 2 touchdowns to 15 interceptions, and routinely melted down on the sideline. His immaturity off the field made things worse, as stories of locker room fights and verbal blowups became just as infamous as his play. Chargers fans had to live with the humiliation of passing on Manning for a player who flamed out within 4 years. Leaf's 39.0 passer rating stands as the warning sign for every franchise evaluating quarterbacks. It shows that sometimes the worst records don't come from lack of talent, but from lack of preparation and leadership. And while Leaf's fall is legendary, the next record shows how losing wasn't just about one player. It defined an entire career. Most career losses by a starting quarterback. Vinny Testaverde played forever, and while that gave him plenty of highlights, it also saddled him with one of the ugliest records a quarterback can own. The most career losses as a starter. Over 21 seasons, Testaverde lost 123 games, a number no one else has ever matched. To be fair, Testaverde wasn't terrible. He threw for more than 46,000 yards, made 2 Pro Bowls, and even led teams to the playoffs. But his career was defined by inconsistency and being stuck on bad rosters. Drafted first overall in 1987 by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he was immediately thrown into one of the league's worst situations. He led the league in interceptions multiple times and never shook the turnover-prone label. Later, with the Jets, he had flashes of brilliance, even guiding them to an AFC Championship appearance in 1998. Yet no matter where he went, Bucks, Browns, Ravens, Jets, Cowboys, losing followed him. Longevity magnified the problem. The more games you start, the more chances you have to rack up losses. But Testaverde's 123 became symbolic of wasted potential and poor luck. In a league where quarterbacks are judged by wins and losses, his record is the scarlet letter. He survived in the NFL for decades, but history remembers him not for the wins he scraped together, but for how many Sundays ended in defeat. And as rough as 123 career losses looks, the next record belongs to a team that didn't just lose games, they were outscored at a level no fan base wants to endure. Worst point differential in a 16-game season. Expansion teams are supposed to struggle, but the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers took losing to a historic level. In their very first season, the Bucs finished 0-14, and it wasn't just the losses, it was the way they lost. Tampa Bay was outscored by 287 points, the worst point differential ever in a 16-game season. They scored only 125 points all year, an average of less than 9 per game, while giving up over 27. Their offense couldn't move the ball, and their defense couldn't stop anyone. Head coach John McKay was brutally honest about the situation, once saying, "We didn't tackle well today, but we made up for it by not blocking." The Bucs became a national punchline. and fans wore paper bags on their heads out of embarrassment. What's wild is that even though they eventually built a Super Bowl winning team decades later, the shadow of 1976 never fully went away. Anytime a team struggles through a season, the 1976 Buccaneers get brought up as the gold standard for futility. Losing is one thing, but losing by historic margins shows just how unprepared and undermanned that team was. And if you thought missing tackles was bad, the next record comes from a kicker who missed more than anyone else in NFL history. Most missed field goals in a season. Kickers usually live in the background of football. They come in, make their kicks, and disappear until the next drive. But in 1968, Jim Turner of the New York Jets made history for all the wrong reasons by missing 27 field goals in a single season, the most ever. Turner was no scrub. In fact, he was a Pro Bowler that year and helped the Jets win Super Bowl III just a few months later. But the record speaks for itself. 27 misses. Part of it comes from the era. In the 1960s, field goal percentages were far lower, with many kickers struggling to even make half their attempts. Still, Turner's numbers look shocking even in context. He went just 34 for 61, finishing with a 55% success rate. Today, that would get a kicker cut before mid-season. What makes this record sting even more is that Turner was trusted with a massive workload. His 41 field goal attempts that year led the league. The Jets believed in him, even as the misses piled up. Luckily for Turner, Joe Namath's Super Bowl guarantee overshadowed his mistakes, and he went on to have a solid career. But the record still stands as a reminder that being a kicker in the NFL is a brutal job. One bad stretch can define you forever. And while missed kicks cost teams points, the next record cost one quarterback his dignity before his career even had a chance to begin. Most consecutive quarterback losses to start a career. For most rookies, the hope is to struggle, learn, and eventually grow into the NFL game. For Deshaun Kaiser, his introduction was nothing but defeat. Drafted in 2017 by the Cleveland Browns, Kaiser was thrown into the fire immediately. The Browns were desperate for stability at quarterback, and Kaiser became the starter from day one. The problem was, the roster around him was nowhere near ready. Behind a shaky offensive line and with few reliable weapons, Kaiser stumbled through what became one of the worst rookie seasons in history. He started 15 games and lost all 15. That gave him the record for the most consecutive losses to start a career. Kaiser threw 22 interceptions to just 11 touchdowns, completing barely over half of his passes. Critics pointed out his mechanics and decision-making, but in reality, no quarterback could have succeeded in that environment. The Browns went 0-16 that year, adding to their reputation as the NFL's biggest punchline. Kaiser never recovered. He was traded to the Packers the following offseason, bounced around to backup roles, and eventually faded out of the league. His 15 straight losses remain a brutal reminder of how starting too soon can ruin a young player. And while Kaiser's record shows one-man struggles, the next record shows how a lack of discipline across an entire roster can doom a team. Most penalties by a team in a season. The Raiders have long been associated with swagger and aggression, but in 2011, that edge turned into a nightmare. That year, Oakland set the NFL record for most penalties in a single season with 163. Week after week, yellow flags rained down on the field. Holding, pass interference, false starts, you name it, they did it. The Raiders weren't just sloppy, they were historically undisciplined. What made it even worse was that they actually had a chance to compete that season. Oakland finished 8-8, just missing the playoffs, and penalties were a huge reason why. The 1,358 penalty yards they racked up essentially handed opponents an extra 13 football fields worth of free yardage. Head coach Hugh Jackson was furious throughout the year, but his team never cleaned things up. Fans joked that the refs might as well have worn black and silver, because the Raiders were beating themselves more than their opponents were. Even for a franchise built on the just win baby mantra, 2011 became the year of just flag baby. And the worst part, the undisciplined style carried over into the following seasons, reinforcing a reputation the Raiders still fight today. But while flags killed Oakland's hopes, the final record on this list represents the ultimate streak of misery. Longest losing streak overall. The 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers were an expansion team with no talent, no chemistry, and no chance. But what they did have was a place in history. Over the span of their first two seasons, the Bucs lost 26 straight games, the longest losing streak in NFL history. The misery started in their inaugural 0-14 season, continued into 1977, and only ended in week 13 of their second year when they finally beat the New Orleans Saints. By then, the team had become a national joke. Comedians roasted them on late night television, and fans wore bags on their heads out of embarrassment. Head coach John McKay, known for his sarcastic wit, delivered one of the most famous lines in football history when asked about his team's execution. "I'm in favor of it." The players themselves admitted morale was crushed, as every week felt like waiting for the inevitable loss. Even decades later, the record stands untouched, as no other team has come close to 2 full seasons without a win. The irony is that just 4 years later, Tampa Bay made it to the NFC Championship, showing how fast things can change in football. But the 1976 to 1977 Bucs will always be remembered not for their resilience, but for their suffering. No record sums up the phrase rock bottom quite like losing 26 straight times. If you like this video, consider watching this next one, which YouTube thinks you are going to really love.